Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Big East Rewind. I'm your host, Chuck Everson from Villanova University, and my point guard, my partner in crime, my main man, Dr. Sonny Spera from Syracuse University. How are you, Sonny?
I'm great, Chuck. I appreciate that pronunciation. I see you've been working on it.
Like that. Len Berman still lives in my head, Sonny. You know,
I'm sure he does. He lives in a lot of people's
there.
head, but he went at you right away, man.
He did, didn't he? I mean, and listen, I grew up watching him every single night live at 5, and I had no problem taking diction lessons from the great Len Berman on how to pronounce Syracuse. He'd be very proud of me if he was watching right now. So that's it.
And our guest today, we've been trying to hunt him down for a long time.
He's been elusive. You know, listen, funny. You know, he doesn't play the game, but he sure has a lot to do with it. And, you know, he has moves like a guard, Sonny, like you say, hard to track down.
What can I say?
Hard to track down. All right.
Guards, so, what can I tell you?
Without any further ado, we have with us today a college sports communications Hall of Famer, Sonny.
Hall of Famer. Another Hall of Famer.
Another Hall of Famer. All right. The Senior Associate Commissioner and in charge of sports media relations for the Big East. And he's a Big East historian on top of all of that, Sonny. So we're going to hear about the history of the Big East today. Perfect. I can't wait to talk to this guy, John Paquette. How are you, John? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be with you guys. And
great to have you.
I have to be a guard because of I can't. I'm just not tall enough to be anything else. So.
Yeah, I don't get that.
Hey,
so
wear
much.
It with pride. Wear it with pride.
Sonny's a 6'5" point guard, John. He doesn't even get that very much.
I remember that. I remember.
He's a 6'5" point guard.
John. He keeps bringing these big guys on here, and he's trying to prove a point because the game has changed so much, and these guys are almost irrelevant. That he just continues, and I feel sorry for him a little bit, but
actually, those are the only guys I see eye to eye with, Sonny. If you want to know the truth.
I thought it's all about positionless players now.
That's right.
That's right. So let's jump in here, John. We appreciate you coming on. First of all, thank you for that. So, you went to Marquette, a future Big East school, but you didn't know it at the time, right? So tell us about your time at Marquette and how you got into the sports information business.
Well, I grew up outside of Philly. Near Norristown, went to Bishop Kenrick High School. Gino Auriemma was a couple years ahead of me at Kenrick. Didn't know he was on the basketball team. I wasn't a friend of mine or anything. But anyway, so I wanted to go away to school, wanted to take journalism, and my mom liked the Jesuits. So I went on a visit out there, liked it. My parents, quote, let me go. And had a great experience out there. I was on the student radio station. I did a lot of the student media stuff, and had to work obviously with this guy called a sports information director. And I didn't even know the job existed when I got to college, but I thought it was kind of cool. You get to do a lot of different things. You get to be part of a team. And when I was at Marquette, and well, it's still the case now, the basketball is very good. So I enjoyed that. And, we were fortunate in my junior year, we won the national title. So
I was going to ask you, Al McGuire crossover. Yeah.
Yeah. And I could tell Al McGuire stories for an hour. They're unbelievable.
We're going to get one. We got to get one.
All right. Al liked to compare sports. And, so he said this, I think, at the Final Four press conference in '77. He said, I don't understand golf. He goes, you get a 40-year-old guy standing over a 2-foot putt and everybody has to be quiet. But you put an 18-year-old on the free throw line with 10,000 people screaming at him and you expect him to make it.
Yeah.
So,
well said.
Yeah.
That's true.
I like it.
That's why you won a national championship.
Yeah. That was the team. They had Butch Lee on that team.
Butch Lee.
Yeah, Butch was my year. Butch Lee, Bo Ellis, Jimmy Bryan, Jerome Whitehead, Bernard Toone. Real good team, although the team, honestly, the year before was better, but that was Indiana's undefeated year. And
Mhm.
so that didn't happen. But anyway.
Were you working in the sports information office there too?
No, I was working for the college radio station. And so that was, which was, great fun. So anyway, so I got out of Marquette and spent a year as a GA down in Louisiana of what is called now Louisiana Monroe. Then came back up, tried to get a job, almost got a job at Villanova, Chuck, as an assistant SID. Was heartbroken when I didn't get it. And then a couple weeks later, there was a job open at Wagner College.
Yeah.
And so I went up for an interview, and this guy who interviewed me he was running his basketball camp that day, that time. His name was PJ Carlesimo. And he was the AD. And so I'm there for the interview, and he's there in shorts and a t-shirt. So I'm thinking, well, it's a job interview. I want the job. So, but anyway, so I'm lucky enough to get the job, worked there 2 years. Then PJ left for Seton Hall. And so I thought, well, it's probably time for me to leave Wagner. And so I went to St. Peter's for a couple of years, Metro Atlantic conference for a couple of years, and then got to go to Seton Hall kind of to rejoin him a little bit. I was there from 86 to 90, and honestly, I was there for great times.
Oh my gosh, you were there for the resurgence.
Yeah.
The rebuild, the resurgence, everything.
The rebuild, everything, the Final Four in 89, and that was just tremendous experience. And obviously, Seton Hall's in the Big East, so I got to know the Big East people. In 90, the job at the Big East came open, and I was able to get it. Mike Tranghese, who had just become commissioner, taking over for Dave Gavitt, who had left for the Celtics. And so I've been there since, and I've loved it. It's been a labor of love.
So
that's gotta be, sorry, Sonny, that's gotta be one of the longest tenures of anybody that's worked at the Big East, John, wouldn't you say? I mean,
for day-to-day people, yes. For day-to-day people go into the office, kind of the quote normal workers. Art Highland, who was the original supervisor of officials, he came in when the league started, and he just retired a year or so ago,
wow.
At least. And John Cal has taken over for supervisor of officials 5 or 6 years ago. So, but yeah, and it's cool. I've just enjoyed every day, every year.
We got to get into the Seton Hall part, because you come in, you said you spent a little time at St. Peter's in the MAC, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Then you come over to the Big East. That's a huge step. PJ's there. You have some relationship. Let's start there. Talk a little bit about PJ.
So PJ is obviously I owe a lot to the guy, because he gave me my first job, and then I get to work with him again. Larry Keating, the AD at Seton Hall, was the guy who hired me, but I'm figuring PJ hopefully put in a good word for me, but it worked out. So, but yeah, it is a big change. Big East. And even though when I was getting there, I thought that things were getting better and they were improving. It looked like a program on the move. I didn't think we're going to the championship game in '89, but I thought things were getting better. PJ is a tremendous guy. Treats the president of the university the same way as he treats people who clean Walsh Gym. Has nicknames for everybody. Probably if you don't have a nickname, he probably didn't like you as much, because he had nicknames for everybody. And he treated me really well. Now, was he serious about his job? Yes. Was he an intense coach? Yes. But he can also be a social guy. I mean, you can talk to him. You can talk to him about anything. Smart guy. I think at Fordham, I think his minor was like in the classics or something. But I really liked working with him, and he was, personally very popular, and amongst coaches, didn't really have any enemies. And I think almost all coaches have an enemy or two, Sonny or Chuck, or, seems like they do anyway. So, but PJ is a tremendous guy, and I owe him a lot.
Yeah. Now, PJ was a hell of an athlete too. So he played multiple sports at Fordham. We talked to him about that. So now I got to ask you, because he referenced a number of nicknames. He called Gary Williams Wacko. So what was his affectionate nickname for you?
Oh, I was Vermeil for Dick Vermeil because growing up in Philly, I'm an Eagles fan. So at Wagner, somebody put a big picture of Dick Vermeil on my desk. So he just called me Vermeil, or he would call me Dick, or then once in a while he would call me Richard to throw everybody off. But it was usually Vermeil. He still calls me that today.
I was going to ask you, I bet you still does. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's that
So
kind of guy.
did he introduce you to some of the finer Italian restaurants in the East Orange area?
Yeah, we had a few favorites. He had a couple favorites, and of course, the best thing. There's a lot of good things about going out with him. But first of all, if you go out with him, you're going out for dinner at 11 o'clock at night. I mean, that's just the way it is. But he always pays. So.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that, because he's not known to pay on the golf course. Just
well. Maybe he felt sorry for his coworkers. I don't know, but he would pick up the tab, and we you go out with him regularly. You close a lot of Italian restaurants, but they were great times. Great times.
Been there, done that for sure with the restaurants. That's for sure.
Now talk about the scene at East Orange, because it's a very small school. We talked to Mark Bryant. We've talked to a couple of guys, Danny Calandrillo, some of the guys that were at the beginning, about this little undersized little Catholic school that was struggling, playing in the ECAC, and Danny Calandrillo says, all of a sudden we're going to play Syracuse, St. John's, and Villanova, and like, why are we doing this? And et cetera. So talk about, you're now at a school that's starting to become a legitimate team in the Big East. Talk about just what changes that you noticed and that you had to be a part of, because you're at the SID. So you had to be part of that.
Sure. And in the first few years of the Big East, Seton Hall was at the bottom.
Right.
And really, UConn was toward the bottom.
Yep.
Providence
yep.
was just not doing that well either. But what PJ and other schools were able to do, because of the television exposure for the Big East, PJ was able to sell good players. You come to us, help us rebuild all our games. Virtually all of our games are on TV, and you'll get the exposure. And we're going to play the best teams. We're going to play Syracuse. We're going to play Georgetown. To your point, Sonny, and it started to work. Now, honestly, it almost didn't work. And, PJ was under fire for a while there. And, in the 87-88 season, at the end of January, I think I'm allowed to say we with Seton Hall, right? That's
yes,
okay.
Sir.
I think we're in last place, 2-6 or thereabouts. And clearly the heat is on. But they turned it around in February, got back to 500 in the league. PJ gets voted coach of the year. Seton Hall goes to the first NCAA tournament in their history. Now, back in the 50s, the NIT was probably as important, or to the schools in the Northeast, maybe more important. But, and so kind of had turned the corner with Mark Bryant as kind of our top dog, local kid from like 2 miles away or 10 minutes away from school. And Mark, you guys talk with him, but Mark was a real homebody. He was a local kid who didn't want to go anywhere, but he's a really good player. And so kind of sold kids on the television exposure. And, Providence did the same thing, and UConn did the same thing. It took a while, though. I mean, PJ got there in 82, 83. I believe that was his first year. And this is 87, 88. So
right.
Providence gets to the final four in 87, and you guys are in the championship game in 89. So that's a turnaround. That's a change of the guard.
And Rick Pitino at Providence, although he turned it around so quickly in 87, he gets to the Final Four. So Seton Hall fans are going, whoa, what's this guy? Like, why can't we do that? And so, that was good for the Big East and quite a feat. at the same time. But Seton Hall fans were like, okay, let's go. What about us?
Right.
What about us? And it did happen. And then 88, 89, we started, I think, 13-0, won the Great Alaska Shootout, and then kind of kept going. And then when I was doing the job interview for Seton Hall, Larry Keating, the AD, says, well, I said, well, what are your goals? And he says, well, I want to stay out at the Meadowlands. I'm like, you're nodding your head because you're on a job interview. Yeah, good idea. But, Seton Hall's drawing like 7,000 fans. But in that season, there was 12 or 13-0, playing Georgetown in the Meadowlands, sold out. And that was 2 top 10 teams playing. And then, Sonny, I can tell you this, the next day or the day after we beat Georgetown, we had to play Syracuse up in the Dome on Saturday. So Friday, we're on a plane. We land at the Syracuse airport. So we're at baggage claim. And the PA at the airport says, welcome to the Seton Hall basketball team here to play the Orange, and congratulations on beating Georgetown. So this is on the PA in the airport.
It just shows you the love we have for Georgetown. I mean, it's to this day, it's the same.
And then we lost by 40, I think, at Syracuse.
Yeah, tough place to play up there, right? That's a tough one. So Coach Carlissimo said when we brought Mark in, that turned everything on its ear. And it was, I think some of it was the natural attrition of the mix of teams that we had in the Big East, because the first 8 or 9 years we had like 7 teams go to the Final Four, and we had 2 national championship teams, and we had 4 teams play in the national championship.
Mm-hmm.
So Chuck, in the first 10 years of the league, Georgetown wins in 84. You win in 85 with Villanova, right, beating Georgetown by 2. The other 3 losses were all by 1 point. Mm-hmm. All by 1 point. So
that's right.
We could have won 5 titles.
Yeah.
So it was Georgetown losing to in the Michael Jordan game. Jordan shot 1 point.
Yeah. Don't mention
Syracuse,
87. Just say Syracuse 87.
Syracuse 87. Okay. Well, and then
don't describe the shot.
I'm not going to describe the shot. I wasn't going to. And then 89, Seton Hall plays Michigan and lose by 1 point in overtime.
You had that game.
That's pretty cool. So
something happened with 3 seconds to go. But whatever.
Talk about the role.
We won't talk about that either.
Talk about the role, John, of an SID at a major school like a Seton Hall in the Big East. You're part protector of the coach. You're part, keeping people giving people their time that they want in the media, making sure everybody comes in. But talk about what your role is when it comes to the relationships with not only the coach, but the players that you're working with. Talk about how that works.
Sure. My job, I think, is to make things as smooth as possible on dealing with media, dealing with the television broadcast, dealing with the print and radio media, setting up interviews. PJ didn't mind doing interviews, but he doesn't want to hang around for 10 minutes and then sit down and do the interviews. So we try to set it up. This is an example of that. So we try to set it up. The TV crew gets set. And I said, when you guys are ready to go and you're really ready to go, I'll go get him. He'll sit down. He does his 8 minutes or 10 minutes, and then he leaves. And that's fine. And everybody gets what they want. For players, they're obviously going to class too. And let's be real, especially maybe more so back then, I don't know. But players aren't anxious to do interviews for the most part, because it's unfamiliar territory for them.
Sure.
So I don't want to say you coach them up, but you talk to them about things that they're going to get asked, and you try to tell them to look at it as an opportunity to kind of sell themselves or talk about themselves in a positive way. So you have to try to kind of balance all of that. Now, when you get to big events, and when we ended up going to the Final Four in '89, it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, it's fun. I mean, it's work and it's fun and um, it's memorable. But there's a lot of managing, and and you guys will know this. In '89, I didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have cell phones. We had regular phones. We had, communication was a little different back then, but that's part of it. I thought my job is to try to make it as smooth as, because PJ was a very social guy, but I knew there were times when he has to coach his team. So, you have your social time, and then, sometimes you have to play bad cop to PJ's good cop, and that's just part of the deal. That's just part of the deal. And I get that, and you accept that, and that's how, in effect, that's how PJ can be a better coach, and the team hopefully can be better because of it.
What was the environment like? So again, just picturing, Seton Hall, it's campus, it's kind of, let's say, small position on the map. All in '89, all eyes are on East Orange. What happens to the climate of your job and what you're dealing with now? You got to have, now you're not getting contacted by just two newspapers. You're in front of microphones. What changes do you now have to experience in this environment?
Just I think it's mostly volume of demand, and when Seton Hall started getting good, it was a good story because we had an affable, friendly coach, social coach who will talk, and we were the new guys, we were the new kids, and we had gone through Syracuse and Villanova and Georgetown. They were the powers, and now this little school in New Jersey, who we didn't see this till later, but I think it was the Saturday of the Final Four when we're out in Seattle, CBS did a piece on even New Jersey people don't know where Seton Hall is. and so, so, they would ask people like, how do I get to Seton Hall? And no one would know the answer, so, but it's different. And, and when we went away, we started going on the NCAA first round. We were in the West Regional, which for some reason, Big East teams do great in the West Regional through the years, So, but we didn't come back. So we ended up not coming back. One week the school was out, and the other week it just didn't make sense to the Final Four. And people told us, hey, there are a lot of people getting excited on campus. So when we got back, we're taking, and of course, there's no charter flights coming back. We're flying commercial after we lose to Michigan in the championship game. So we get back to campus about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I remember talking to my secretary, Jeannie Fritzen, and she said, there are a lot of people here waiting for the team. And I'm like, yeah, okay, like how many? And she said, thousands. And so I thought it was going to be a couple hundred, because to your point, Sonny, we're a little campus. We don't have a big enrollment. And so there were, I don't know, 10,000 people waiting for us at Seton Hall. And you guys have been on campus. You guys have been to Walsh Gym.
You can't fit 10,000 in Walsh Gym.
No, you can't. No, you can't. But that was, that showed you the growth. And so we lost the game, but still in South Orange, there was a parade for us. I mean, down, of course, it's the main street near Seton Hall campus. It's not the Tournament of Roses parade, so, it was a nice thing. I remember it's kind of cold and rainy and everything, but it was a parade. We had a parade, and, and we didn't win. We didn't win.
Yeah, imagine if it was the other way around, right? Imagine if you would have won, how many people would have showed up out there?
People treated us like winners, and everybody says, "Oh, the bad call" or whatever. And so, but if they wanted to treat us like that, so and Chuck, you remember Craig Miller from Villanova,
Sure.
Who was my counterpart, and so the morning of the championship game, when we were getting ready to play Michigan, I called Craig and I said, so tell me what happens when we win. So like, tell me what it's going to be like.
Chaos
Tell
happens.
me, yeah, tell me what. And he goes, yeah, that's what he said. It's chaos. But I felt that the way we lost, it was still chaos, because people treated us incredibly well.
Yeah, that's great. So now how do you go from Seton Hall, John, to being Mike Tranghisi's first hire with the Big East?
Well, I was Mike's first hire, although it's not like he said, I need to hire somebody, I'm going to go hire John. That was the job was open. So that was
come on. Just make that the story. That the story. Nobody's checking.
Right. Nobody remembers that far back. I actually think that the Final Four run helped me for the Big East job because it exposed me to a lot more, and a lot more national media and bigger events, and so I kind of think that that helped me. But and I already knew the people at the Big East office: Tom McElroy, Linda Bruno, Chris Plonsky, and I had the opportunity. Seton Hall was all for it. PJ and Larry Keating, and they were all supporting me. So I was able to get it, and it was terrific. It was new and different. Working for a conference office is different than working for a school. But got started and hung in there, and it gets me a good seat at the tournament, and I don't want to give it up. So I'm still here.
Yeah, don't blame it. So obviously you weren't there when Gavitt was there, but his shadow was a big shadow that was cast over Mike when he came in and took that seat. And there was a lot of people, both positive and negative. Talk about how Mike had to deal with that, and not only that, but your role in helping him through that, with the media.
Well, the media had liked Mike. When Dave was in charge. I mean, Dave obviously was the guy and the visionary and started the league. Mike was very content to be the behind the scenes guy. And kind of Dave was the vision guy, Mike got the details done. And so now it was a different situation for him. But the best thing about Mike is still, he has no ego. Like it just didn't bother him. Like, people said, I remember Neil Best wrote a story, a profile of him, and the headline said he was kind of like Clark Kent, he's mild mannered, but he got things done, and he could get a lot done. But Michael didn't have an ego. He didn't mind if people kept talking about Dave and the greatness of Dave, and he knew that. But Mike was the first full-time employee at the Big East. He was actually a full-time employee before Dave. But he was great to work for. He was great for me. He said to me when he retired that he and I had never had a crossword between us, and we hadn't. And he's the kind of boss where he knows if I come in with a problem, something we have to talk about, then he knows it's serious. But for the most part, I don't know if shielded is the right word, but you keep your boss informed and let him know when there's a problem.
Yeah, he let you do the job the way you felt it needed to be done. That's a good boss right there. That's a leader.
And he started really with that job at the Big East, so he understood kind of what you were dealing with.
So Coach Vermeil, got to ask you another question. What was it like? What was it like with some of these other coaches? What was it like around John Thompson? What were some of your interactions with the late great John Thompson?
Always good. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that we had a 10-minute conversation every time we saw each other. I'm not going to tell you that. But he was always fine with me. So one of my jobs is to be moderator of the press conferences at the Big East tournament. Right. And so, it's the cool part of the job. I just love doing it. So obviously, Georgetown won a lot of games in the Big East tournament. So he would be sitting next to me a lot. And when Georgetown would lose, there was no one kind of classier and calm and complimentary. But when he won, sometimes he maybe get a little ornery. And so somebody, for a sample question from the press conference, someone would shout out, say something like, Coach, Alonzo, 20 points, 16 rebounds, 5 blocks, good game. And coach would say, so what's your question? If you have a question, I'll be happy to answer it. So I love that stuff. But he was always fine. You just explain what the duties were and what the obligations were. He did them, and fine, everything's good.
How about at his retirement, John? I mean, there was a story we heard about when Big John retired with you.
They announced that they'll have an announcement on Friday. It was Friday that week. And so again, my phone rang more the night before that announcement than ever with anything I've ever dealt with. And so again, I guess this is 2001 or so. I'm trying to remember the year, but anyway, so I'm sitting on my kitchen table. I have one of those, we all had, phones with the regular push buttons and all that kind of stuff. And so all I did was keep my hand on, and people would keep calling me. What's Georgetown announcing tomorrow? What is it? What is it? What is it? What is it? Because Georgetown never had press conferences. But nobody knew. So people just kept calling me because they figured I knew. I didn't know. Didn't know. But I also said, I mean, do you think they're having a press conference to announce that they're going on probation or something? I mean, what do you think this is going to be? It's not going to be, something like that. But I didn't know. I did not know. But my phone rang more that night, and people kept calling me. People would call me 20 minutes later. You hear anything? You hear anything? You hear anything? But that's part of the job, and that night it was memorable.
So you knew what you were going to get when you had Coach Thompson. You said how he reacted on a loss and when he reacted on a win. Who were some of the wild card coaches where you go, oh no, I don't know what's going to happen when this guy walks in?
Sonny, should I start with Coach Boeheim? Or
that'd be a good place to start, I'm thinking. He threw a
chair. I was going to ask you about your relationship.
Well, you weren't there yet, John, but you remember when he threw the chair at the press conference.
Yes, I do. I've seen that. I'm glad I wasn't there that day. Coach Boeheim, extremely loyal. I've always gotten along with him, I think, very well. Loyal to the Big East. Was loyal to the Big East. My one memorable time with him, which I didn't have anything to do with, fortunately, was in 2006 when Jerry McNamara makes a 30-footer against Cincinnati in the first game of the Big East tournament to win the game for Syracuse. But earlier in the week, there was a story of unnamed Big East assistant coaches, supposedly, who voted Jerry McNamara the most overrated player in the league. So you can tell sometimes when Coach was getting ready, like he was
percolating.
He's percolating. So, I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit. And he said, I don't know who these coaches are. They'll never be head coaches. They obviously don't know anything about the game of basketball, blah, 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 blah. And he said, let me tell you something. We wouldn't have won 10 effing games without Jerry McNamara. And except he didn't say effing.
Right.
He said the real word. And he turned to me, and because he realized what he said. And he turned to me, and there's, I don't know, 100 media, watching there. And I think ESPN was doing it live on ESPNU or something like that. So he turns to me and he said, "John, can I get fined for that?" I have no idea. So, I said, "No." I mean, what was I going to say? Yes, I'm going to fine you, or so, and so he said it. Mike Hopkins used it for recruiting the, longtime assistant coach, because he said, "Look how coach sticks up for his player." And so we have a transcription service called ASAP. It's kind of the gold standard for college events. And so there's a transcript of everything coach says. So they showed it to me before, and they said, "Look, we just want to show you before it goes out. We have it in. Do you want to leave it in or not?" And it was FUCKIN apostrophe, because that's the way he said it. I said, "Well, he said it, so we're going to leave it in." And it was fine. Actually, we got compliments for leaving it in to the transcript. But I always enjoyed being with him, and wish like maybe a lot of Syracuse fans, I wish they were still in the Big East. I wish.
Me.
Yeah, I know, and a lot of Syracuse fans in the New York area when we're out and about. But anyway, that's we understand the situation there. So, but he was great. He's loyal. I mean, once in a while at the Dome, we'd be in the press conference and he would see me there. And at the end, when he was complaining a little bit about this or a little bit about that, or maybe he didn't like every call in the game, he would say to me, "Hey, John, have Art Highland give me a call in the morning." So I, of course, said, "Got it, coach." So he was always great with me, though.
So let me ask you about a couple other coaches. All right. So you were there for the end of Louis's term, right? So talk about Louis for a minute. And how was he at these things?
Great. He knew how to kind of spin a story. Always ended up talking about Italian dinners.
Yeah.
However it started.
Spongili.
Yeah, and he would say, "Yeah, I'm going to go have some veal tonight," but he knew how to do that, and as well as anybody. Now, he was a fighter. He was a competitor. I mean, if anybody thinks otherwise, they're crazy. But he was very competitive. They won a lot of games. But he was, everybody liked him. I mean, he had everybody wrapped, and not in a bad way, in a good way. He's a friendly guy, liked to tell stories, even though most of the stories were kind of the same. But Sonny, like you were saying, it's all kind of the same, and it always ends up talking about an Italian dinner.
So
you were surrounded with a few Italians though. PJ, Louis, Mass, Rolly. What was Rolly like? Now, you're a Philly guy, so you have to have a little bit of an affinity towards Rolly.
Well, yeah. I mean, growing up, I watched college basketball. I watched Big Five basketball.
Big Five,
That's what I did. And Villanova was always or just about always as good as anybody. So yeah, I watched. And then when I was at Seton Hall, we of course faced Rolly all the time. Obviously. Rolly, well, I shouldn't be the one to comment. Chuck should be talking about Rolly. But, great, won a lot of games, had his way on the sidelines a little bit. Passionate, sometimes got into emotional states a little bit, I guess. Emotional states, is that a nice way to put it?
Yeah, you're going way too politically correct here.
Correct. Yeah.
It's part of my job, Sonny.
He's a professional politically correct guy.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know how I could spell some of these. Come on.
Wow.
We know what it was.
So all right. So let's go in a
different
direction, John. So you said you were the moderator at all the Big East press conferences and stuff.
Yeah.
What was it like when everything stopped, the pandemic hit, and we had to cancel the St. John's game? at the half and stop the whole tournament. How
Yeah,
difficult was that for you?
That was really tough. I mean, that was the most downer day for me anyway, in my career, but but it was just such a downer day because you could sort of see things building, the day before. And then, we were going on what local health officials were telling us about, large gatherings and events and all that kind of stuff. And that's when kind of they told us in the morning everything was okay. And then a couple hours later, they told us it wasn't okay. So we kind of knew we had to stop. And, we stopped at halftime of St. John's versus Creighton. So it's about 1:45 in the afternoon that was Thursday.
Right.
Then we had to do a press conference, and we did the press conference with Val Ackerman, our commissioner. And she was terrific at explaining, we didn't give short answers. Val gave, here's what happened. Here was the timeline. Here's what we did. And, but that was hard. And then, I mean, just a couple of hours later, they canceled the whole NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
That was, I don't know, for me, that was rough. That was rough.
When March Madness goes down, that's a
That's a big one.
And when they start, and because when we can't, when we called off our tournament, like I think the ACC and the Big 12 had called their tournaments in the previous hour or so. So you kind of, and of course everybody's talking to me during the game, what's going on. So you kind of knew it was happening, but it was, and of course, this had never happened before. This had never happened before to this magnitude.
People watching at home. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sonny. I'm sorry.
Speaking of things that never happened before, let's move into the UConn Syracuse 6 overtime game.
Yes.
Because we talked to Coach Calhoun about it too, and talking about just that moment. At what point did you think, oh, this is going to be a memorable game? Like, at what point was it like, oh, this is going to be epic?
Well, first, let me say, leading into the game, for Big East staff who were working the game, the one thing we didn't want was overtime. So in that game, because we played 4 games on Tuesday, 4 games on Wednesday, and 4 games on Thursday. And this was the last game. So we're all on the tired side. So we think Eric Devendorf is the greatest guy in the world after he hits that shot at the buzzer. And he jumps up, you guys know, he jumps up on the press table and, exalts.
He goes Eric on him. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And then John Cal was the lead ref in the game. And I think it was Bob Donato, they're looking at the replay and it's close. I mean, it's really close. And they decided to disallow the basket. And I think the monitor was closer to the Syracuse bench, because I think Coach Boeheim said, you better be right. He may have added an expletive or two, I'm not sure. But, and so then you go overtime, so you think, okay, well, we're going to go overtime. And then you go double overtime. And then, but I think, Sonny, for me, once we got to overtime number 3, you're like, this is pretty cool. Because these weren't just 2 teams that happened to play 6 overtimes. These were 2 ranked teams. These were 2 really good teams that ended up playing 6 overtimes. Now, there's all kinds of stories about people missing their trains, people getting their cars locked in the parking lots, media who are covering the game. The game ended at 1:22. People were done writing their stories at 3, but there's no trains at 3. So you kind of had to hang out for like a couple of hours to get the morning trains to get home.
Wow.
It was great stuff. I think we walked out of the Garden at 3:37 that morning, and but that was just an epic game. And as you know, Syracuse had to tie it every overtime until the last overtime, where they they kind of took it over. And Coach Calhoun was not happy and it was distraught. And the one thing that I used to love Jim Calhoun saying was people would ask him why he wants to win the Big East tournament. And he would always say, I want to be the best kid in my neighborhood. And I love that answer. I love that answer. And, but, you know, it was 127, 117, I think. And Syracuse, you know, they made their own tapes of the game and had shirts made and, you know, did all kinds of stuff, which I think anybody would do. And
That's
then
70 minutes of basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and then you hear about people who left at the end of regulation and got home and the game's still on.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
so it was wild. It was the most memorable game I've ever seen. I mean, you know, and then as guys start fouling out, fresh guys come in off the bench, you know, and they just look so much fresher than everybody else. And, you know, that was Johnny Flynn playing 7 minutes, I think. And
Yeah.
AJ Price and for UConn and all that.
So talk to us now that we started the memory thing from the Big East. Talk about your favorite memories of the Big East tournament, John.
That's the most memorable one. You know, that's not a moment, but it's the most memorable game.
Yeah.
I think, you know, when, you know, the Kemba Walker shot, when they beat Pitt in
over Pitt,
2011, you know how where you hear people say, oh, I still get a chill over that. Well, every time I see that shot, it still does something to me. You know, it's and people forget how good Pitt was. You know, Pitt was like, I think, third in the country. They lost in the quarterfinals and they were still a #1 seed in the tournament, you know, on Sunday when the bids got handed in. I mean, they were, and this was UConn's third game of what would be 5 that no one's ever done in college basketball history except UConn when they won 5 games in 5 days.
Yeah.
And they beat 3 ranked teams. So, but even by game 3, and if you remember, it was a noon game. They're playing 3 games in 3 days, and the third game's at noon. Like, it's not at like 9 o'clock at night. It's at noon. And, you know, I just watching that him make the shot live. And then you think to yourself, it's a little after 2 in the afternoon. I'm in New York City. If you open up the doors, you're going to see Midtown Manhattan, you know, regular daily life, you know, but we're at the Big East tournament. And I thought to myself, there's no place I'd rather be right now than right here, you know, being part of this.
Yeah. We've talked about the Madison Square Garden, the whole aura of the Garden. It's just magical on Saturdays at the Garden.
When Friday and Saturday, when the teams line up, the lights go out, we bring a Broadway singer in to do the anthem. When that doesn't get me juiced up, then it's probably time to go. Because
time to stop. Yeah,
I love that. I love that. I'm obviously partial, but I think we have the best tournament.
How about some of the matchups, John? You know, the player matchup they had back in those days, you know, you had Allen Iverson versus Ray Allen. That was a hell of a matchup in the Big East tournament.
That was the first time we played Saturday night championship game because we used to play on Sunday.
Sunday,
So
Sunday it was. Yeah.
That was the game that was the first ESPN championship game, and Brad Nessler and Dick Vitale did the game. And that was crazy. I mean, Ray Allen, I think, shoots 1 for 10 in the second half, and the one was the crazy one. Right. And then Georgetown has time to come down. Iverson misses the jumper, and then, you know, really the putback by Jerome Williams, which people kind of forget about. I mean, he was right there. And I also think UConn scored the last 12 points of the game in that game, I think.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about team matchups? I mean, there were some good ones for there too. I mean, you know, like you say, even current day. I mean, you know, you and I saw you at the tournament this year, and you know, there was a buzz this year for the first time in a while because I guess we're coming off of having no tournament and then having limited, you know, no fans, you know, so it was tough, but people were excited to be there, I thought.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I thought we were back to Friday night and Saturday night being the greatest nights. And part of that, and that's helped by UConn coming back. I mean, UConn fans, and they missed going to the Garden to see their team play, and and UConn's good. I mean, they've been good. They've been successful. So I think that adds to the aura, and certainly Villanova's run, which is, I mean, they went to the Final Four last year, so it's still, it's fair to say it's still going.
Still going, yeah.
So, and we've ended up with some great championship games. I mean, really the last 5 or 6 years, Villanova and Seton Hall have played great games. I mean, terrific games. Whether it's in the Big East tournament or during the regular season, that matchup comes to mind right away. But we've had Providence do well in the tournament the last few years. And, I worked, when I first got to the Big East, we were in Providence. That's where our offices were. And so, we knew all about hopping on the Amtrak down to Madison Square Garden to, to watch the Big East tournament. So that's been great. Last year we had unpredictable stuff that everybody did. Providence get picked 7th, they win the regular season, and then 2 years ago Georgetown, wins the tournament as an 8th seed. It's, those are good memories. But we do have some good matchups, and this year's, I think it's going to be more of the same. It may not be exactly like it's been, but we're looking forward to the season now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty wide open this year. I mean, you could say probably Creighton is maybe picked, a little bit above everybody, but now you have, equalizing factors. Jay retires seemingly out of left field. Nobody really knew what was going on there until it happened. Kyle Neptune comes in, and now I look at all the different changes that were made. And it's a very diverse league now when it comes to head coaches and stuff. I think it's all good for the league. And we had Val on the show, and she's terrific. I don't think she gets nearly enough credit for what she does. I mean,
amazing woman,
amazing lady. Yeah, for sure. We were really impressed with her story. So talk about what it's like working with Val.
It's great. When the new league formed, it was the presidents of the league basically deciding we want to go back to the future where we want to get out of the football stuff and we want to control our own destiny more. And so I didn't do it. The presidents did. They hire Val Ackerman, a basketball person, and Val has been, as you guys know, on every level. She was the founding president of the WNBA. She was president of USA Basketball for a long, long time. She was a basketball player and one of the first scholarship players at UVA. She's done a terrific job of guiding the group, because, I mean, when the first year of the new league, 13-14, when Creighton plays Providence in the final, we have 14,000 in the building. It was Doug McDermott year, and 14,000 was a nice crowd, but it wasn't what we were used to, so we needed to keep going, and Val is the one to organize it, to get everybody together, working together. And really, when Dave Gavitt started the league, even though Syracuse and Georgetown, to use them as an example, maybe going like this all the time on the court, they're together off the court. And we know that everybody has to work together. We're not in the football business, we know that, but we want to be an elite basketball conference. And, you have to work together to do that, because we don't have some of the finances, honestly, that, some of the football teams have, but, we have to be together, work together, and root for each other when we're not playing each other. So
that was key to the early Big East, right, John? I mean, I know, and Sonny and I have talked about this on the show. I mean, we would root for a team like Georgetown, say, if they were playing, one of the Carolinas or Virginia or somebody else. We would root for Providence if they were playing Tennessee, stuff like that. And it's not that way in the ACC. And I think that's part of the problem. That's what, when you see a Duke and a North Carolina, yeah, there's rivalries here in the Big East, but those guys don't root for each other no matter who they're playing. I mean, it's bizarre to me. I mean, from where we came from,
Yeah, and yeah, sometimes it's all on what you're used to, but yes, I agree, and we do root for each other. And I know some people on the outside maybe wonder about that or wonder if it's really true or not, but I think it is, especially in the tournament. I mean, first of all, the athletic directors want everybody else to win because you get units, and units mean money, and all that kind of stuff. But that's the business part of it. But we do root for each other, and that that comes from our coaches. And when we're in meeting rooms with the coaches, which only happen once or twice a year, but coaches want to work together. And our men's basketball coaches right now, it was Jay, and now we have Ed Cooley and Greg McDermott at Creighton, and those kind of people, and they want their we want to try to work together. We want to try to work together. And we have some new coaches this year. And although all the new coaches have already worked at their present schools, a couple of guys have been head coaches, and a couple of guys were, players and assistant coaches. So it's not totally new. I just saw a quote from Sean Miller, who said, you don't have, the Big East is the same as it's always been. It's always tough. It's always physical, tough to win on the road. He said it's the same way when I was a player. And so, he was, the point guard for Pitt during some of their glory years. And, so I think in a lot of ways, the league has not changed, Chuck, to your point.
Yeah.
Well, you said back to the future. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
It's working.
We're getting up against it, John. Give us a couple of more good stories, and then we'll wrap this thing up. We appreciate you coming out.
No, I've enjoyed the conversations. I just think that the relationships that you have with people are, we're all lucky that we get to see some great games, and we've talked about some of the great games that we've seen. But it's the personal relationships with people, and for me, it's the coaches and staff, and even people at the Garden. I mean, we're, that's where we go every year. We have such equity in the building, but you get to know the people and the relationships and just the little stories. And this is about 5 years ago, I actually tripped and cut my head, in one of the post-game areas. And so, I went to the hospital, they fixed me up. So the next day, some of the workers, they give me a hard hat with Madison Square Garden on it so that I could wear it for the rest of the term. But it's just little things like that, that, you have relationships, you have friendships, and, you want to try to help the other people. That's really the coolest thing about working there.
You know what? I got to agree with you. I'm sorry, Sonny. I got to agree with you. We figured this out as we're doing this show and having guys on that we really didn't have major conversations with when we were playing, except on the court. And it was only, it wasn't too nice at that time. But we've become friendly with a lot of guys from a lot of teams, and some are unexpected. And some, we kind of figured that guy was a good guy or whatever. But, you get to learn who people are for, after the competition is over, and everybody's going at each other's throat, especially in the Big East. It was a very tough physical conference, and still is to this day. But at the end of the day, we all went through the same thing. The only thing different is the color of the uniform that you wore, and I think that bond, having gone through that, no matter what team you played for, is very strong, and everybody appreciates what you did, whether you were a starter and scored 30 points or you came off the bench and contributed in whatever way you could. So I think that's the beautiful thing about the conference, is the camaraderie to this day. It really is great.
It's why I love being part of it. Really is.
Yeah. for as many years as you've been there, John. It's fantastic. Well, our guest today has been John Paquette of the Big East Conference. John, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming out and sharing your stories with us and your insights to behind the scenes of what goes on at the Big East.
It's a pleasure and a lot of fun. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Big East Rewind with Sonny Spera and Chuck Everson. The Big East Rewind is produced and directed by Nick Chico Chorus and Daryl Gurney. You can check us out on all things social media by putting in Big East Rewind. We can see us wherever you get your podcasts from Spotify to iTunes and the like. And also on YouTube, you can put Big East Rewind in the search bar, and all of our 70 some odd videos will come up. And we ask you that you like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Thanks a lot. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.